Hello and welcome to News Centre. I'm Parikshit Luthra. The union budget is just around the corner and different industries have submitted their budget recommendations to the Finance Ministry. Today we look at the wish list of the electronics and mobile industry. Apart from other recommendations, the Indian Cellular and Electronics Association wants the government to extend the scheme for promotion of manufacturing of electronic components and semiconductors for a further period of 5 years, with an outlay of 10,000 crore rupees. They have also recommended a removal of all input duties on mechanics. High-end smartphone makers have sought capping of the basic customs duty on phones priced above 20,000 rupees at a flat rate of 4,000 rupees, saying the current 20% levy has not helped push local manufacturing. To discuss this, we are now joined by Pankaj Mohindroo, Chairman of the Indian Cellular and Electronics Association, and Manish Sharma, Chairman of FICCI's Electronics Committee, also the Chairman of Panasonic Life Solutions India. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Mr. Mohindroo, the Prime Minister wants mobile phone exports to be among the top 10 exports from India in 2023, with an overall 1 lakh crore worth of exports in this calendar year. Give us a sense of what we need to do in terms of achieving this. The industry, including the ICEA, has given a detailed representation on rationalizing customs duties, especially on some components, in order to make the mobile phones cheaper, more competitive in global markets.
Thank you, Pariksha. Thank you for having me here. We are well on the way to achieve 1 lakh crores in 2023. In fact, this is the beginning of a big journey which started about 5-6 years back. This year itself, we have in the first 9 months exported over 60,000 crores of mobile phones. So 1 lakh crore, in spite of the very tough global economic condition, does not look impossible. Now, the 2-3 things which you mentioned that we are looking at, otherwise the environment is conducive, industry is very vibrant. Domestic demand has not been good this year, but otherwise industry is very vibrant. The first is that we import about 1% of our phones now. 99% phones are made in India. These 1% phones are the high-end phones which, because of the high duty, 22% and 18% GST, a grey market has developed of over 10 to 12,000 crores a year. So we have requested that the basic customs duty should be capped at a certain number, and this will not impact manufacturing in any which way, because anyway exports are on the fast trajectory now. The second is that we have a structured phase manufacturing program, and the duties were actually for a particular period demanded by the industry itself, by us, that we need a little headroom to start manufacturing in India. But last year there were some unintended, unstructured duties which crept in, particularly on mechanics, and across the board a 2.5% duty was imposed on many inputs. This we have requested for a removal. These are the basic demands of the industry. And the spec scheme has been the component industry which has just started taking off now. We want it to be extended with a further outlay of 10,000 crores.
All right. So those were the basic demands when it comes to rationalizing the tariff structure. But when we speak about the larger electronics industry, Manish, to get you in, we are also in a way facing a big competition from Vietnam, which is a strong electronics manufacturing base. A lot of the China Plus investments are going towards Vietnam. How do we check that? How important is it to have a review of the entire tariff structure in the electronics industry?
Should I give you the overview of where do we stand today and how do we look at the next midterm? I want to tell you that incidentally, I was in Vietnam recently and wanted to really understand and pick up some of the benchmarks. So I may not agree in total that a lot is going into Vietnam. I believe that we have moved to being exponential in terms of starting to implement a lot, which is going to create a huge impact in the time to come, specific to the manufacturing and the backward integration, which is the need of the hour. And there are clear data points which are reflecting, and Mr. Mohindroo clearly mentioned that how in last 5 years, so much has happened into mobile industry. And the overall electronic industry actually is picking a lot of learning from what has happened in last 5 years within the mobile phone industry. So in the first instance, we need a very structured approach. And say if I have to give you a backdrop, if you look at 5 to 6 to 7 years, we started off with capex oriented incentives in the form of then the MSIP scheme which came in, and a lot of encouragement came in, and including manufacturers like us enabled our new investment in the backdrop of the MSIP scheme which existed then. And then subsequently, the phased manufacturing program, which is a very methodical approach to maneuver through the duty structures between the finished goods, say a air conditioner or a television, with respect to the components, so that in the first instance, we let the assembly of those goods start to happen in the country. And now for the electronics industry, the approach looking forward to next 3 to 5 years is that, one, we have to ensure that everything what we consume in the country, whether it is air conditioners, washing machines, televisions, the small kitchen appliances, the assembly of all what we consume in the country should happen in the country. And I believe that the actions which have happened on the duty structure and also the recent announcement of PLI has started to enable this. And if you look at air conditioners itself, of roughly about 8 million of air conditioners which we consume in the country annually, 95 to 96% of production has already started to happen, and 2.5 million ACs used to come from elsewhere just about a couple of years before. So that is the logical outcome of the schemes like PLI. Specifically talking about this budget, while I must say these days the policy interventions are no longer central to the budget, they keep going throughout the year. But I think again we are looking at rationalization of duties into components of certain products. Say for televisions, we are expecting that the import duty on open cell should go down. Similarly, for components into air conditioners and washing machines, say for motors, etc., should go up, because that will help production of those components start to happen in the country, and we are able to do away with the disabilities which exist currently. So that is how we are looking at the overall approach of electronics industry.
Okay. Manish, if I could ask you one more question. You've
part?
also asked for... yes, Mr. Mohindroo, please.
No, see, Vietnam is a fierce competitor.
And if I can quickly put in one question on Vietnam only.
Yes.
If I can put in one quick question on Vietnam only. We believe that very recently, 14 joint ventures, which were actually makers of Apple components, mobile phone components, they've been given clearance to have JVs with Indian entities to make in India. At a certain level, we also believe that the government is now on a case-to-case basis allowing these joint ventures with Chinese companies where we don't have strength right now. These are intermediary products where we need to have growth in future, but right now these JVs are necessary. So are you seeing some sort of movement, faster clearance of joint ventures in the electronic sector, in the mobile phone sector, especially when it comes to Chinese companies, Mr. Mohindroo?
I'll come to that. I will answer it in its entirety. The Vietnam is a very fierce competitor. In fact, Vietnam is way ahead of India in electronic manufacturing. And this process started about 10, 12 years back. Vietnam's export of electronics is about $130 billion. Their net export accreditation, which is the value addition in export, is $30 billion. They import $100 billion, they export more than $130 billion. So we have a lot of catching up to do. Vietnam also has a very enviable structure of FTAs with almost the entire world, including India. So if one is producing in Vietnam, you can supply to India without duty. Now, coming to this specific question, if a company has an option, company emanating from China has the option of going into Vietnam with 100% investment, versus going to India with a 49% investment, you can guess where the company would like to be. The other very important thing, Parikshat, is that we have to have a complete change in the mindset of the nation and our industry for export versus import substitution. Uh, the industry leaders, always talk about import substitution. This is the market in India. India is a very tiny market. In most categories, it's around 2 to 2.5%. Only in mobiles, the market is about 5.5% of the world, but that's not very big also. So the only way India can grow is by occupying a large part of the global market. And that is exactly what Vietnam has done. Vietnam has a very strong position in global exports. They're a very tiny domestic market. Their domestic market is not even $15 billion, but their export is $130 billion. So there's a lot of lessons for India to be learned.
Right. Uh, Manish, my final question to you. What do you feel about Chinese investments, Chinese joint ventures with Indian companies in the electronics sector? We believe that currently India would also like BYD to come and have a joint venture with an Indian entity to make iPads in India, Apple iPads in India. How important is it to allow these joint ventures with Chinese entities to boost our entire electronics manufacturing ecosystem?
Parikshit, it's a complex subject. I will quickly take a moment to respond to Mr. Mohindroo's comment. Yes, it is true that we have to have a larger vision where we need to improve our competitiveness to consider the global opportunity to be, our opportunity. On the other hand, if I quickly give you one more data point, I believe that in the first instance, as I mentioned, that it is important that we understand that what is that which we can leverage on. And you look at air conditioners, I might be repetitive on this opportunity, but today we consume only about 8 million air conditioners in the country. You look at China, they consume roughly about 50 million air conditioners in their country, and they produce 120 million air conditioners in their country, the rest of which is like exported. So in that sense, in the first instance, we have an opportunity to unlock the demand, the potential of demand within the country. And only then the current disability, which exists in a lot of products, with the economies of scale getting created, will get eliminated in next 3 to 5 years. And I completely agree with Mohindroo that we need to have a long-term vision, say in 5 to 10 years. How do we do a catch-up and ensure that we are competitive on a global scale? And I would not be specific to a company which is wanting to establish a joint venture in our country. However, on a level of holistic perspective, we need to ensure that in the first instance, the strategic purpose of letting the production or manufacturing of a particular product or component to happen in our country needs to be unlocked. So that has to be the central purpose. And as you also rightly mentioned, case to case, looking at the nitty-gritties of every project which has been proposed, the approvals are happening.
Right. We've run out of time, but Mr. Mohindroo and Mr. Manish, thank you very much for joining us with your budget recommendations and also the long-term strategic roadmap that we need to strengthen India as an export base when it comes to mobile phones and the larger electronics ecosystem. We're going to take a short break, but when we return, we look at the tussle between the government and the Supreme Court over the collegium system of appointment of judges. A special discussion with senior advocate Dushyant Dave when we're back. Welcome back. The tussle between the government and Supreme Court over collegium system has intensified. To break this down for us, we're now joined by Dushyant Dave, senior advocate at the Supreme Court. Mr. Dave, thank you very much for joining us. Looking at the way things have been going, we've seen this becoming a major flashpoint between the judiciary and the government. Can there be any middle ground at this point?
I think the only middle ground can be if the Honorable Prime Minister intervenes and stops, the members of his party, including the Honorable Minister, the Honorable Vice President and Honorable Speaker, from attacking the judiciary the way they are doing. I mean, there is no other option because I don't think these people are doing it on their own initiative. Prime Minister knows it, and his steadied silence tells the country that perhaps this is with his blessings.
Right. Mr. Dave, even in the past, we'd seen this during the UPA as well. There was an attempt to amend the manner in which judges are appointed to the Supreme Court and different high courts in the country. Do you feel there needs to be some change? Somewhere the judiciary needs to hear the government when it says that there needs to be a government representative in the body which appoints judges to different courts in the country?
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, in an ideal situation, I would have agreed with you that perhaps the collegium system needs to be changed, because my own personal views were in the past that collegium system was not very conducive to the Constitution. So yes, it was my feeling at that point of time. But in today's circumstances, my own feeling is completely different, because one sees the kind of appointments that this government has been making in high positions, including constitutional offices. And if the government were to have any say, the kind of appointments they have made to these offices, if they were to start filling judiciary with that, it would cause immense, I would say, harm to the judiciary in the long run, to the administration of justice, and ultimately to the people of this country. So I think it's very difficult to really see what is going to be, the outcome. I feel that let the collegium system go on, because we have now a Chief Justice who's there for 2 years' time, and that's a fairly long tenure. Perhaps he will try and steer the ship in the right direction, and try and see that the appointments to the high courts and Supreme Court are made in a proper perspective and as independently as they are expected to be.
Right. I would also like to ask you about the government's reaction. The Law Minister, Kiran Rijiju, said, and he expressed serious concern about the fact that secret inputs of RAW and the Intelligence Bureau and inputs of the government about recommended names were made public. What do you think? Could this worsen the tensions, the flashpoint between the Supreme Court and the government?
Well, I would like to ask the Honorable Law Minister that how is it that the government is using these agencies to, for characterization of outstanding citizens? How is it that the government is getting this, self-serving input from these agencies? Why doesn't government ask them? Because, I mean, I know of all these people, for example, whose information was had to be put by the collegium in public domain. Each one of them is an outstanding lawyer. There is nothing wrong about them. And they are absolute, great Indians. They love this country. They have impeccable characters. They have great competence. There is no reason why they should have been discredited by these agencies by giving these bogus reports. So Mr. Rijiju should explain to the country how these reports are obtained. Are these agencies giving tailor-made reports to the government? So I think, I'm sure Collegium was under great pressure not to go public like this, but it was left with no option. Because if you give this kind of false reports about individuals and try and block them, the country must know that these reports are definitely tailor-made. So I think government will have to really backtrack on this. I really wish, because Prime Minister is a very respectable leader. He enjoys immense popularity. He is a very wise man. He should intervene and stop his ministers from this kind of slinging match, saying that judges don't go to elections, nobody judges them and all that. What is all this nonsense going on? If the judges were to be elected, I think we'll see what politics is today. I mean, our judges will become like that. We don't want our judges. They have to be selected, because election brings in all kinds of ills which we are seeing today in public life. So I think it's really sad the way the minister is going about.
Mr. Dave, is the judicial community, even among the judges, is there a division on the collegium system? We saw Justice Sodhi going on record to say that the Supreme Court is hijacking the Constitution and the collegium system is arbitrary.
Look, there is today unanimous support for the judiciary. I was myself once upon a time a strong critic of the collegium system. I have argued that when the NJSC case was heard. But today's situation has changed. In last 7-8 years, the kind of appointments that have been made, in various constitutional offices, and I must say also sadly within judiciary, because collegium after collegium were, I would say compromised because of weak chief justices who were, who really government had some hold on each one of them. And they really ensured that some very questionable appointments were made while making some outstanding appointments. So, I mean, I feel that today, everybody who was critical of collegium system would perhaps think many a times before saying that government should have any role in appointing High Court and Supreme Court judges. Don't forget that most of these judges who are appointed to High Court and Supreme Court end up spending at least 15 to 20 years in judiciary. And if we are going to have questionable people appointed for 15 to 20 years, I think it will destroy very independence of judiciary, the administration of justice, the rule of law, and constitution all will fail.
Right. My final question, Mr. Dave, what do you think now is the best way out? We've seen the Supreme Court again reiterating names of 20 judges, then giving very detailed observations, detailed recommendations to justify the decision for each judge. What do you think could this standoff really lead to? What is the best way out for the future? Because it was the UPA earlier, then you had the BJP, then there might be another government in future which may again push for changing the collegium system. So what is the best way out?
I'm not sure what is the best way out. Frankly, our body politic, our public life has suffered so much that it is very difficult to find now clear-cut answers. To have good appointments in any institution, especially constitutional positions. So you have to go with what is the best in the circumstances, and the best in the circumstances today appears to be the collegium system. So I really hope and I pray that wisdom dawns on the government, and government sits down with the judiciary to iron this out. Understand what the viewpoint of the Chief Justice and his colleagues in the collegium is. And because, see, none of these names, I can understand if any one of the names that is being reiterated is questionable. We all know within judiciary, and you can cross-check with large number of lawyers who are regularly practicing in various courts, that each of these names that collegium has recommended are of people with outstanding ability, with very large practice. These are the people who want to sacrifice for the country. They want to give up their, practice with large earnings and go and work for the country at a paltry sum of 1 or 2 lakhs of rupees which judges get. So why is it that, these people are not being appointed, with open hearts by the government, and rather government is trying to push them away? So I think government really doesn't want independent judiciary, doesn't want judges who are, very brilliant. That's very clear from government's approach.
All right, so let's wait and see what happens in the days to come. Mr. Dave, thank you very much for joining us here on News Center, weighing in on the tension we're seeing between the judiciary and the government over the collegium system. That's all we have on News Center. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.